Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at some of the guns they're going to be selling in their upcoming December of 2017 premiere auction. And today we're taking a look at, well, the rifle's not really important. It's this guy that we're interested in today. This is a VB, or Vivien-Bessiere, grenade launcher, and it was the standard grenade launcher for the US forces during World War I, adapted directly from the French. It was also their standard predominant grenade launcher during World War I. Now, it wasn't the first. The French actually started by using what were called rod grenades, which is it's a type of rifle grenade that requires no adaptation of the rifle. Instead, the grenade actually has a steel rod of 12 inches or a little bit more on its base, and you thread that rod down the barrel of the rifle, and that's what aligns the grenade and keeps it in contact with the barrel while it's being fired. You would use those with a blank cartridge, and there is a lot of potential for accidents and problems if you accidentally use a live cartridge with it. And of course, there's just running a steel rod down the barrel and then firing it out repeatedly is going to cause a lot of damage and wear to the barrels. So the rod grenades weren't a great idea. The French actually copied those originally from the British. The French went into World War I with no rifle grenades at all. And by the end of the war, they would become a very significant part of French infantry tactics. So in 1916, they developed this style of launcher, and this really would become the mainstay of the French forces through the war. And it was what the US would adopt when the US entered the war, also with no rifle grenades. Now, the idea is it's a pretty simple cup launcher. It fits onto the end of the barrel, grenade slides down into it, and what's interesting about this system is the grenade that was used with the VB has a hole all the way through the center of the grenade. So you actually fire it using a live ball cartridge, regular ammunition, and the bullet goes zinging through that hole in the middle of the grenade. It actually hits a little lever on its way through, which starts the fuse on the grenade, and then the gas pressure behind the bullet throws the grenade out. The range of these was at an 85-degree elevation, about 80 yards, and at a 45-degree elevation, just under 200 yards. So these were very much this medium range of attack, in between the distance you could heave a regular hand grenade by hand and the distance at which you would start using something like a light trench mortar. The French would use these in a combined arms little infantry squad where you had a couple of rifle grenadiers along with something like a Shosha automatic rifleman and some guys with hand grenades, and you'd have this combined arms attack that turned out to be very effective for overwhelming enemy strong points. At any rate, when the US entered the war, they wanted to use these. The initial ones were manufactured by the French and provided to the US. They had some problems because they didn't actually account for the difference in pressure between the American and the French service cartridges. So the US started developing their own version of the VB launcher. They went through 4 different marks, and this is actually the very last production one. So let's take a look at it up close. So the original Vivien-Bessiere grenade launchers didn't have this fancy spiral cut to them. They just had they were a sleeve that went over the barrel with a little cut, a slot cut in them to go around, well, 2 slots, one to go around the bayonet lug on the bottom and one to go around the front sight on the top. And they just nested over the end of the barrel. They tended to work loose a bit, and so later iterations added a flat metal spring to just keep some tension on them. And those were kind of the original versions that the US used as well as the French. However, the US continued to develop these, and by the end of the war, they were making the model of 1917 Mark IV, and that's what this one is. And it has this spiral shape to it, which allows it to latch very securely behind the front sight of the rifle. So to take this off, I'm just going to rotate it like this, pull it back, and off it comes. There's our marking, US, model of 1917. That doesn't have anything to do with the rifle, and I don't know what that W is for offhand. Model of 1917 was the designation for the grenade launcher. So during World War I, the US used 2 different service rifles. The majority of US armed forces actually used the 1917 Enfield, but there were also a substantial number of 1903 Springfields in service. With the grenade launchers, the attachment method, this spiral bit here, was the same for both rifles, and they both worked the exact same way. However, the barrel dimensions were a bit different, barrel diameters. And so they did have to make separate versions of the launcher for both rifles. And in order to differentiate the two, the launchers for the Enfield rifles, the 1917 rifles, had this knurled ring at the top, while the launchers for the 1903 Springfield rifles did not. They were smooth at the top. So you have an easy visual and tactile way to confirm that you had the right launcher, because they are not interchangeable. The one is too tight to fit on the other, and if you try and reverse it, I think it's the 1903 Springfield launcher will be too loose to fit effectively on the 1917 Enfield rifle. So this is a plain hollow tube, and in theory you'd have no problem using the rifle with the grenade launcher still attached, although you wouldn't be able to effectively see your sights past it. But the grenade that these threw was about a 1-pound grenade, just a little over a pound, about half a kilogram. It had a time delay fuse of between 5 and 7.5 seconds, depending on variation from the factory. And as I mentioned, that fuse was automatically ignited by the bullet when you fired the grenade. In total, the US would make something like 20 million of these grenades during World War I. They were a very important and effective part of French and US infantry tactics. One interesting quirk of these grenade launchers is because they did use live ammunition, regular ball ammo, and because they were typically fired at a very sharp or very steep angle, US training ranges back home after the war typically didn't have the capability to safely practice with these grenade launchers. The grenades were fine. The problem was the bullet that was fired at 45 degrees would often travel well beyond the end of the range and create a safety issue. So in the 1920s, the US actually developed a wooden bullet loading specifically for practicing with the Vivien-Bessiere grenade launchers. The wooden bullet, of course, didn't have the range that the metal ones, jacketed lead bullets did, so they didn't create that safety issue. Note that the inside of the launcher is not rifled, it's just smooth bore. This is, well, with a maximum range of 200 yards, you don't really need to bother with rifling, and that would have added a lot of complexity to the grenade. The US would end up using these VB launchers through World War II, really. They were declared obsolete at various points in the 1930s, depending on which mark and variant you're talking about. But apparently, from what I've read, there were still some that were in service in far-off garrisons like the Philippines when World War II began, and they did actually see combat use there against the Japanese. So if you'd like to have this particular one, it is in really excellent condition. Definitely not the typical, usually when you find these, they're dug up out of a World War I battlefield, and that's definitely not the case here. At any rate, if you take a look at the description text below, you'll find a link to Rock Island's catalog page on this launcher and the rifle that it comes with, and it's actually a very nice example of a 1917 Enfield rifle. Anyway, you can take a look at Rock Island's pictures, description, price estimate, etc., and place a bid right through their website if you're interested. Thanks for watching.